while we do want to discuss Iran with you, we have some breaking news just crossing the terminal that you're also perfectly poised to weigh in on. OpenAI has disclosed that its models breached more boundaries in third-party cyber testing. 2 external testing partners identified incidents. This is separate from the Hugging Face incident that has already been reported, in which their models accessed the public internet. OpenAI saying here that their models breached testing boundaries, and they're going to be reviewing their own approach to third-party testing and reviewing third-party testing scope and safeguards. This is not just a one-time instance, it seems. OpenAI is now saying this has happened repeatedly. How do we get our arms around?
Yeah, so I think the meeting that they'll be having at the White House with some of these frontier model developers, Anthropic, OpenAI, and others, is really important for establishing that framework for testing, particularly from a national security perspective. You know, over the weekend, there were reports, there's some ambiguity, but 7 to 12 states that have had water, critical infrastructure affected by cyber attacks, possibly by the Iranians. And while so far every breach that we're aware of has been one a U.S. company has its model has broken through and done something with very minimal human direction, that's absolutely not the kind of capability that we can afford to fall into nefarious hands. And so that'll be a really important meeting.
I don't know if it's encouraging to you that we learned about this from the company itself. OpenAI is the source of this information. And it makes clear, just like the last time this happened with Hugging Face, Kailey, the new incidents involved models accessing the public internet during third-party cyber evaluations under specific conditions and reduced safeguard configurations that did not reflect ordinary deployment. To what extent do we factor that into news like this? They could be seeing this as a breakthrough.
Sure. So I think it's very, technology always moves faster than policy.
Yeah.
And this is an area where, for a variety of reasons, we've been challenged collectively in coming up with the kind of policy safeguards that would allow us to safeguard our nation and our critical infrastructure and yet still be a leader in terms of innovation. There is a tension there between the two. And again, technology almost always exceeds policy, but this is a dangerous area
for that. If the guardrails were down in this case, though, that means this might not have happen if they were up.
So
Should
perhaps
we be encouraged by that?
No, not.
Okay.
Discussion about this White House meeting, which not a lot has been disclosed, but as I understand, possibly a voluntary framework. Perhaps it should not be voluntary. And we've done a lot to downgrade, disable a number of elements in the U.S. government, one of them being CISA, the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency, who should play a lead role in this. And I'm afraid they are probably not as robust as they used to be.
Well, your suggestion that maybe it shouldn't be voluntary, if it's made mandatory, the concern that President Trump has expressed is that means we cede ground to China.
Exactly. That's that tension between being an innovator and having a lead from a technological development area, as well as then employing safeguards. There's definitely a tension there.
Let's get into the war with Iran, which is why you came here initially, and we appreciate your bearing with breaking news. Kailey made the reference at the outset here that the president has made a routine of this, walking up to the line with very grave threats and then pulling back at the last minute. Some call it taco. The market calls it a reason to rally. The New York Post added these up to find that he has done this 13 times. As somebody who's actually worked in the highest ranks of our military, do you get a 14th?
Well, I always temper my enthusiasm because there have been a lot of pronouncements that are made for things that don't come to pass or agreements that are made that aren't implemented. That's frankly not where I'm tracking my own, sources for developments in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And many times these agreements, even when they're struck, are much harder to implement than they are to say that we've reached a deal. So I think I am cautiously optimistic in terms of reopening the Strait. That doesn't mean it's going to open tomorrow or return to commercial normalcy in the near term, because there is so much work, as Kate just outlined, before I came on, so many things to consider. Demining, the specifics of what the administration of of the strait will look like. And commercial shippers and the companies that insure them will expect some trial runs, some demonstration of feasibility and safety before they are willing to send large numbers of vessels through. So, we're not going to see the straits reopen, per se, tomorrow. Will a vessel go through? I'm sure that probably will, but I don't think we count that as open.
Mm-hmm.
Well, U.S. Central Command actually just posted on X that within the last 3 months, they've seen to it that 1,000 ships have been able to exit the Strait of Hormuz. Even if we are able to do that, it becomes a question of how long. Can the U.S. maintain this blockade, this support of commercial vessels indefinitely?
Yeah. So there are two different things. The blockade is preventing vessels from, that's about putting the economic squeeze on Iran by preventing vessels from getting to their ports. Work that is done to open the strait. U.S. Central Command, where I worked and,
led their intelligence.
Right. They've done a tremendous job of destroying a great deal of Iran's military capability, but they haven't eliminated it. And frankly, they will never eliminate entirely the ability to choke off the strait because the target of that strategically is commercial shippers. And it doesn't take much to shake their confidence as they weigh the potential for profit against a perception of risk. And all Iran has to do is elevate their perception of risk to impact the flow of ships. That's a very high bar for us to eliminate. Frankly, I would say impossible.
The President talks a lot about our satellite capabilities. For instance, Pickaxe Mountain, we've been watching it. He says every day we can mow the lawn whenever we want to. I'm wondering to what extent we have on-the-ground intelligence in Iran, the extent to which we know what people are thinking and what the regime is doing. Do we have enough human assets to understand what's happening?
Well, Joe, if I had details on our intelligence on the ground, I would not tell you, and I would not tell you on television. But I would say, I look at two things. One, we've already talked now about our ability to degrade their capability, but not to eliminate it. The other half of the coin, though, and this is what I actually find more bothersome, is there's no indication that we've moved the needle on Iran's strategic calculus, that we've done anything to truly impact the thinking of the men in charge, of the people who are calling the shots in Iran. And right now, that's actually the IRGC. Another reason for cautious optimism regarding negotiations for the Strait, positive movement or discussion, comments that come from diplomatic channels may not always match what happens in the security state in Iran, the IRGC, the ones who really, I think, are calling the shots and can be somewhat autonomous from the diplomats.
Well, and is there a chance that the IRGC is looking at reports like the one that came out from Reuters today that the U.S. is running very low on key munitions and thinking we can outlast this?
All along, Iran, I think, has believed that time is on their side.
Is it, though? If we're running low on stockpiles?
That time is on their side. So they believe that, their strategy is to survive, avoid capitulation, and make the war so politically and militarily politically and economically intolerable for us that we back off. They think they have tremendous leverage in their ability to choke off the Strait of Hormuz, and that, again, time is on their side, and that we lack the tactical patience to see this through. I would add, it's not just about the Strait of Hormuz anymore. The last 2 weeks, Iran has demonstrated an ability to hold at risk oil and energy infrastructure across the entire region, whether that's, the Houthis enacting a blockade at the Bab el-Mandeb, attacks against Red Sea ports in Yanbu and Aqaba, even as far as Egypt, or the Emirati port in the Gulf of Oman. That happened a couple months earlier. So I think that additional demonstration of capacity is part of what compelled our Gulf allies to pressure the president to say, let's prioritize diplomacy for now and hold off on these heavy military strikes that are being threatened, because it's our Gulf allies who carry the risk for Iranian retaliation. They're the ones that are economically suffering more than us, and that physically are on the receiving end of those strikes.
We're out of time. I'm getting the hook here, but General, we're out of ATACMS? Has this war been well managed?
Well, I'd say there were a number of probably planning assumptions that have proved false. And had all of those assumptions proved right, it would have been over in a couple of weeks. But, that decapitation leads to regime change, that sinking the Navy eliminates the maritime threat, that having air superiority will allow you to dictate terms. None of those are true. If they were, it would be over.